Welcome to Relation Tales. Please like this video and subscribe Relation Tales. We're grateful for each and every one of you. Let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let's begin. The night it all unraveled still burns in my memory like a scar that refuses to fade. My name is Michael Hayes, and if you're hearing this, you need to understand one thing. I wasn't just a husband. I was a man who gave everything to the woman I loved, only to realize too late that love had been nothing but her disguise. It was a Thursday evening, 7:19 p.m. sharp, when I pulled into the driveway of the home I had bought outright in Westbridge. The porch light was off, a detail that immediately unsettled me. My wife, Lauren, never forgot the porch light. Inside, the silence pressed down like a weight. Dinner sat neatly prepared on the counter, her famous lemon chicken with rosemary, but it was stone cold. An unopened bottle of wine stood beside it, one glass poured but untouched. "Lauren," I called out, my voice echoing against the walls. No reply. The house felt wrong. Too still, too deliberate. I checked the living room, her latest sketch half finished on the easel. Our bedroom was immaculate, as if staged for a showing. The bed untouched, the yoga mat rolled and tucked away. Her car was gone. I dialed her number, and her cheerful voicemail, "Leave some love," stabbed at me like glass. My hands trembled as I sent 3 desperate texts. "Where are you? Call me. I'm worried." No response. By midnight, I had called her mother, her best friend, her sister in Los Angeles. None of them knew where she was. That was when panic set in, not just fear of her being missing, but of what this might mean. Because deep down, something ugly whispered that maybe this wasn't danger, maybe it was choice. The next morning, my world caved in. 2 detectives, Rivera, an older man with storm gray hair, and Daniels, a sharp-eyed woman not long on the job, sat across from me at our dining table. "Mr. Hayes," Rivera began, clicking on his recorder, "we need to ask you directly. How was your marriage?" I didn't hesitate. We were happy. I loved her more than anything. This isn't like her. Daniels leaned forward. "Did you ever hear the name Mark Whitfield?" The name hit me like a punch. I had never heard it before. "No. Who is that?" Rivera slid a blurry security photo across the table. And there it was, Lauren, my wife of 4 years, kissing another man outside a restaurant at 1:14 a.m. The same night, she told me she was out shopping for curtains. My throat locked. My chest burned. Daniel's voice was calm, surgical. Phone records show she's been in daily contact with Mr. Whitfield for months. Calls, texts, trips, thousands of messages. I shook my head violently. No, that's not possible." Rivera didn't stop. He scrolled on his tablet and tilted it toward me. More images. Lauren laughing at a winery, her hand entwined with his. Lauren at a concert, radiant in a way she hadn't looked with me in years. Lauren sprawled across a hotel bed in lingerie I'd never seen before. It felt like my chest had caved in. And then came the knife that twisted deeper. Rivera read aloud from intercepted texts between her and her friends. "Michael has no clue. He's basically my ATM. Can't wait to cut the cord and take half of what's his. Once the merger finalizes, I'll file. No prenup. He's too blind to see it coming." I couldn't breathe. The woman I adored, the woman I built a life for, hadn't just been unfaithful. She had been plotting. And as the detectives kept pressing, the terrible realization sank in. Lauren hadn't vanished. She was executing her plan. But what she never expected was that I had already begun mine. Sleep became impossible after that night. Every time I closed my eyes, those images returned. Lauren kissing him, laughing with him, lying to me with such ease it made my stomach twist. I sat in the study with the curtains drawn, nursing black coffee until dawn, replaying every detail of our marriage like a film reel. Had I missed the signs? Or had she been that good an actress? Her routines used to be sacred. Yoga at 7 a.m., sketching until noon, errands by mid-afternoon, dinner prep by evening. I admired her creativity, her quirks. Now I saw them for what they were. Carefully structured lies designed to cover stolen hours with him. I couldn't stop picturing the conversations she must have had, whispering into her phone while I sat in meetings across town. Was she curled on our couch, mocking me to her friends, while I thought she was painting? Was she in his arms while I broke my back closing deals to keep her in luxury? The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was financial, emotional, spiritual. She had mapped out a future where I was discarded like an old coat, worthless once stripped of money. But here's the part no one knew. I wasn't as blind as she thought. The first crack had appeared months earlier. A restaurant receipt tucked into the lining of her purse. Dinner for two. When I casually asked about it, she lied without hesitation, saying she had eaten with her friend Madison. But Madison had posted an Instagram story from her office that very evening, complaining about being stuck late at work. That's when something in me shifted. I stopped believing her words and started observing. One night, while she was passed out on the couch after finishing half a bottle of wine, I carefully installed tracking software on her phone and synced it to mine. Every location ping, every text, every photo, it all came to me first. What I discovered in those weeks was devastating. She wasn't just unfaithful. She was cruel. I listened to her recorded conversations in the car, her laughter sharp as she told her lover, "Michael is clueless. He thinks I'm working on my art while I'm working on you." She joked about my devotion, calling me a walking wallet, and the one that nearly made me put my fist through the wall. "I'll divorce him as soon as his company's merger finalizes. Then I'll take the house, the investments, everything. He'll never see it coming." She wasn't wrong. I hadn't seen it coming, but now I did, and I wasn't going to let her win. I started documenting everything. Screenshots of her texts, recordings of her calls, notes on her schedules. I built a timeline so meticulous it could have been a case study. But while she thought she was preparing to ruin me, I was preparing something else entirely. By day, I maintained a charade. Breakfast together where I smiled and asked about her paintings. Evening walks where I pretended not to notice her slipping away to check her phone. Nights in bed where I kissed her forehead and whispered goodnight, even though my mind was already calculating. Inside, however, a storm brewed. I considered exposing her immediately, taking everything to her family, her friends, blasting the truth online. But revenge is only powerful when it's patient. If I revealed what I knew too early, she'd twist it, play the victim, and walk away with sympathy. No, I had to dismantle her carefully, piece by piece, until she had nothing left. The first step was financial. Quietly, I created a second account in my name only and began siphoning money out of our joint accounts, small enough to go unnoticed, steady enough to secure a safety net. Then I updated my will, removing her entirely, and moved certain assets in a trust she couldn't touch. The second step was social. I rekindled connections with old friends and colleagues, making sure my reputation was solid, untouchable. If she tried to smear me later, no one would buy it. The third step was psychological. This was where patience was most critical. I let her believe she was winning. I encouraged her independence, even gave her space, subtly feeding the illusion that I was distracted, detached. Every time she thought she was fooling me, she only dug her hole deeper. But the real plan, the one that would change everything, I kept locked inside my chest. One evening, I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching her apply lipstick before heading out. She caught my gaze in the mirror and smiled that sweet, practice smile, the one I used to believe meant love. "I'm meeting Madison for dinner," she said. I nodded, forcing a calm I didn't feel. "Of course. Have fun." Her phone had already betrayed her hours ago. She wasn't meeting Madison. She was meeting him, Mark Whitfield, at the very restaurant where she once swore she had only been with a friend. As she walked past me, her perfume lingering like a taunt, something inside me hardened. This wasn't just infidelity. This was war. And while she thought she was scripting my downfall, I was already writing her ending. The cruelest part of betrayal isn't the act itself. It's the performance that comes with it. The way a person can look you in the eye, kiss you goodnight, and still plan your destruction behind your back. Lauren thought she had mastered that performance. She didn't realize she was playing to an audience who already knew the script. I remember the night clearly. She came home late, hair slightly mussed, perfume mixed with an unfamiliar cologne clinging to her clothes. She slid into bed next to me, feigned exhaustion, and whispered, "Love you." I whispered back, "I love you too." My voice didn't crack. My face didn't betray me. But inside, the decision had already been made. I wasn't going to confront her. I wasn't going to plead or fight. I was going to break her, and I would do it so cleanly that she wouldn't see it until it was too late. The first layer of revenge was financial. I made subtle changes that she couldn't detect. Our joint checking account still looked healthy, but little by little, the real assets slipped away into secure holdings under my sole control. The brokerage account she thought would one day be hers, closed and moved. The trust fund she once asked about, redirected. By the time she discovered the truth, her jackpot would already be gone. But I didn't stop there. The second layer was reputation. Lauren's entire identity was built on appearances, her charm with friends, her artistic flair, the way people admired her beauty and spontaneity. So I planted seeds, small, almost invisible hints that would grow into doubts. When she snapped at a waiter during dinner, I exaggerated a wince and later mentioned her stress to a mutual friend. When she complained about money to her sister, I quietly sent over a generous check to her parents for home repairs, making sure they knew it came from me, not her. Slowly, subtly, the narrative shifted. Michael was the dependable one. Lauren, the restless one. The third layer was psychological. This required the most patience. I began leaving subtle traces of suspicion, little ghosts that made her question whether she was as clever as she thought. Once, I casually mentioned her favorite cafe, a place I knew she visited with him. Her fork froze halfway to her mouth before she forced a smile and said, "Oh, yeah, I go there sometimes after yoga." Another time, I asked, "Do you ever get tired of Madison? You're always with her." I watched her eyes flicker, a bead of sweat glistening at her temple, before she laughed it off. The more she scrambled to maintain her lies, the more power I felt surging back into me. But the masterpiece of my revenge wasn't money, or reputation, or mind games. It was patience. Because Lauren believed timing was her weapon. She wanted to wait until my company's merger finalized, so she could strike when the payout was largest. But while she was waiting, so was I. I moved the company's annual gala forward by 2 months, convincing the board with fabricated scheduling conflicts. She thought it was routine. For me, it was precision. The gala would become my shield. Hundreds of witnesses, timestamps, photographs, and conversations that would prove my whereabouts no matter what she claimed. The night before the gala, she staged her usual girls' night out. I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the cold dinner she hadn't touched. My phone buzzed with her location ping. She was in a hotel downtown, registered under a fake name, but sharing a room with him. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and whispered into the empty house, "Enjoy it while you can." The morning of the gala, she was unusually sweet. She kissed me on the cheek, told me how proud she was of me. I smiled back, knowing every word was counterfeit. But instead of bitterness, I felt calm. Because I knew something she didn't. Her game was over. At 4:30 p.m., I left the office early. At 5 o'clock, Lauren and Mark received text messages from what they thought was each other, inviting them to a surprise meeting spot for a night they'd never forget. Neither realized those messages came from me, carefully spoofed and timed. When they walked into that abandoned warehouse I prepared weeks before, they weren't walking into romance. They were walking into judgment. I didn't rush it. I let them stew in their confusion first, each believing the other had planned the evening. And when I stepped from the shadows, their faces told me everything. Lauren's shock, Mark's sudden panic, the realization that the man they thought was weak had been listening, watching, and waiting. "Michael," she gasped, voice trembling. "This isn't. What are you?" "Save it." I cut in, my tone calm, almost gentle. "I know everything. Every text. Every call. Every lie." Mark tried to bluster, stepping forward as though his bulk could intimidate me. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said, locking eyes with him. "You thought you could take what was mine. You thought I was too blind to see. You were both wrong." They stammered, pleaded, offered excuses. But their words were meaningless now. Because my revenge wasn't anger, it was precision. They had mocked me as naive, a man to be used and discarded. Tonight, they would learn how wrong they had been. The plan was already in motion. By 6:15 p.m., I would be walking into the Riverside Hotel, shaking hands, laughing, delivering a keynote speech. Meanwhile, Lauren and Mark's future would dissolve into silence. And the world? The world would never know. The gala was dazzling that night. Crystal chandeliers, velvet drapes, champagne flowing like water. My colleagues clapped me on the back, praising my keynote. Cameras flashed, documenting my every smile, every toast. To the outside world, I was the image of composure, a man celebrating success. But inside, I carried a secret that no one else could ever touch. While I mingled with investors, Lauren and Mark were already gone, swallowed into a plan I had perfected down to the minute. My car had been sanitized, every trace erased. Their phones, planted and pinged near the quarry, would confuse the timeline just enough to keep detectives spinning in circles. By the time suspicion drifted my way, the alibi was airtight. Hundreds of witnesses, photos, time-stamped surveillance. It would take a miracle to pin me. And miracles are rare. The investigation came, of course. Detectives Rivera and Daniels pressed hard. They shoved photographs at me, asked if I had searched Mark's name online, pushed me to admit arguments that never happened. But with every question, their frustration grew. No body, no blood, no physical evidence. I played the part of the wounded husband flawlessly. Red-rimmed eyes, tired sighs, whispered, "I just want her safe." Publicly, I was a victim. Privately, I was free. Lauren's family despised me, but their anger only deepened my shield. They screamed on television that I was dangerous, controlling, manipulative. Yet the more they shouted, the weaker their credibility became. Without proof, they were just grieving relatives throwing stones. The DA had no choice but to drop the case. And just like that, suspicion faded into whispers. But the story didn't end there. Because revenge isn't truly satisfying unless it echoes long after the act. I kept living, methodically, carefully. I dined at the same restaurants Lauren once adored, sat at the table where we had laughed like newlyweds. To others, I looked haunted, a man trying to heal. The waitstaff spoke kindly, offered condolences, admire my strength. They didn't realize the truth. I wasn't broken. I was in control for the first time in years. I even started seeing someone new. Rachel Turner, a pediatric nurse, soft-spoken and gentle. On our first date, she looked at me with pity in her eyes. "It must be unbearable," she murmured, not knowing where she went, not having closure. I gave her a faint smile, carefully rehearsed. "The uncertainty is hard, but I've made peace with it." She squeezed my hand across the table. She thought I was brave. In reality, I was savoring every moment of the performance. But what she and everyone else could never know was this. Lauren hadn't simply disappeared. She had been erased. Her lies, her schemes, her betrayal, all wiped from existence with the same precision she once mocked me for lacking. Sometimes, when the house is quiet, I pour a glass of wine and walk into my study. On the shelf sits a framed photo from our wedding day. Lauren in white lace, smiling as though love were eternal. I keep it there not out of sentiment, but strategy. Visitors see it and soften. The grieving husband clinging to memories. It earns sympathy. I stare at that photo and whisper words no one else will ever hear. "You underestimated me. You thought you could take everything. But in the end, Lauren, I took back everything you tried to steal." Do I feel guilt? No, only clarity. She gambled on my blindness and lost. Now, when I look in a mirror, I no longer see the naive man who handed over his heart without question. I see someone sharper, colder, more dangerous. Someone who understands that survival isn't about love or trust. It's about control. And the truth is, revenge wasn't an impulsive act. It was justice. My justice. The world believes Lauren Hayes ran away with her lover. They think I'm the man left behind, scarred but surviving. Let them believe it. Their whispers only make the truth more powerful. Because while their voices fade, my secret endures. And every time I raise my glass in a crowded room, every time a new client praises my resilience, every time Rachel looks at me with admiration, I remember that night in the warehouse. I remember their faces when they realized too late that the man they mocked had been 10 steps ahead all along. That's the memory that fuels me. That's the ending Lauren never saw coming.